Carrie, what was your aim doing this exhibition? What did you want to show? It's a larger answer question.
There's so many ideas, it's not...
But it's the first time you are showing in France.
That may be true. I'm not absolutely sure if that's true, but it's certainly the first time I've done a major exhibition in France. And the project, of course, is called The Shape of Things. And I think probably to a large extent, much of the work has to do with the way I think of architectural forms, that structural forms that in some way inform the cultural, political, and social moment of our time. And so there are a number of different pieces in the exhibition. Maybe there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there are 5 or 6 or 7 different sites of the exhibition. All of them, I think, interlocked, interlinked, all of them in one way or another spinning around this idea of our historical moment and why it's so important to interrogate the moment and to interrogate democracy itself. But it seems to me that democracy is indeed under threat, not only in the United States, but in Europe as well, where the rise of the right-wing fashions that are determined to stop any form of integration, any form of inclusiveness, I think is deeply troubling and deeply problematic. And in one way or another, much of the work kind of touches on aspects of that idea and question.
But what is an historical moment compared to a non-historical moment?
I think that it is a significant moment. It's a significant moment that we are experiencing. It's a significant moment that somebody like George Floyd was murdered before us, right? It's a significant moment that in relationship to the Black Lives Matter movement, that institutions around the world are trying to grapple for the first time with how they plan to respond to the moment that we're in. That's significant, not just an everyday occurrence. These are moments that will change the face of how we live our lives and how we think about our lives and our cultural, social, political position as we live our lives.
But with the distance of time, there's a lot of historical moments.
Of course. This is just another one.
And are you interested by what's going on in terms of politics in Europe, in France too?
Not just in France, but in Europe generally.
Yeah, but the show is in France, right?
Yes, but that's not the point.
Yes.
Right, it's the show is in France, but it's not about France.
No, but I wanted to have your feeling about what's the local situation.
So then maybe it's another question then.
Yes.
So what's the question then?
So the question is, are you interested in what's going on in France in terms of politics?
Oh, of course.
And what's your feeling about it?
What's my feeling about it? I think it's probably in some ways not unlike my feeling about what's happening in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, that we are dealing with many of the same obstacles. We're dealing with the same kind of right-wing groups that are emerging, that are resistant to social forms of change, where traditions are in question in new ways. And that is deeply troubling for many people. So just as we are experiencing it in the United States, we are experiencing it here in France. And I think that that's one of the reasons that the work has the ability to speak across culture.
And so can you give us an example of what an artist, I mean you, can point about the political fact, historical fact of today with one of your work in the exhibition?
Well, The Shape of Things in the cyclorama is probably a really great starting point because it actually unpacks the rise of the right against social change. It points to both the circus of politics and the politics of circus, and how we can sort of use that as a metaphor, circus as a metaphor, to talk about the rise, for instance, of a character like Donald Trump, who indeed becomes president of the United States. A completely unimaginable thing 50 years ago, that this man is in office and running again, we find quite disturbing and quite
of
upsetting.
course.
But it's a great moment that he sort of epitomizes something that's so dangerous, that we are allowed to see the unraveling of, we're allowed to see the unraveling of the right in a very extraordinary way, and their desperation, right? We're allowed to see it through their desperation, the unraveling through their desperation, and the election of someone like Trump, right? So that all decency has been thrown out the window. Now, as long as this person can get the job done, which is to abolish all forms of decency, then we'll hold on to it, right? That we're willing to sacrifice our deeper values, our deeper quest for humanity, as long as we can stay in power, and as long as power is reflected through whiteness, right? If it's reflected through whiteness, and that's what Trump is, right? So he epitomizes the worst of who we are, the worst of our possibility.
Yeah, it's a real tragedy.
It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. It's a Greek tragedy. It's a great. I think that it's really important. And I'm really happy. And in this other way, I'm very happy that it's happening, because I think that it's raised the stakes, that people see clearly, more clearly than they ever have before in the United States, what we actually really are up against, and what the threats of democracy really are, and that it's not simply coming from black voices or from the other or from the margins. It's dead center in an unequivocal way that we have to deal with and we have to negotiate. It's brought people together in a way that has never happened in the United States.
And as an artist, your reaction, you want to give a form to what's going on, and how does it work? So when you saw that this guy was elected, how did it work for you to react to that as an artist? I mean, what form to give to this kind of...
It wasn't just a reaction to Trump, it was really the rise of the Tea Party generally.
Yeah.
And so I had started working on those ideas very early. I made some of my first videos around the rise of Sarah Palin. But Sarah Palin was sort of the test model for Donald Trump, which I think is really sort of fascinating. So I've been looking at this work for a very long time. I think that the thing that I'm most interested in, it's not, I'm not trying to tell people what to think about anything. I think that what my work is always trying to do is to simply raise a set of questions that might be important for us to engage, and that each individual then has to find their answer in their own way. My job is not to provide answers. My job is to raise questions for myself, and then by extension, my audience, you.
And you speak a lot about freedom too, right?
Freedom is the ability to take risk. The ability to take risk. And doing an exhibition like this gives me freedom to take risk. And, I was asked to do this project, The Shape of Things in the United States, which is actually very interesting. You might be interested in this. And a group wanted to take it to the swing states in the United States. Those states that are, they could go either Republican or they could go Democrat. It's not quite sure what they're going to do. Maybe we could use this piece, The Shape of Things, the video here, and we could move it around the country and take it to swing states. And then I realized, if that were true, that I would probably need security. That I would need security. Absolutely. Right? That I am challenging one of the most fundamental assumptions of the right at this moment, and their total fanaticism around Donald Trump. We saw it in the January 6th uprising, that thousands of people marched into Washington and actually attempted to take over Congress, over the Senate.
Unthinkable.
Right? So what's happening? What's happening, I think, is extraordinary, and in part my work is speaking to that, and the ability to take risk. Freedom is the ability to take risk at all costs. So we have the possibility to sit, stand, or speak.
There are two places in the show showing that, right?
Yes.
That you can speak loud if you want.
That's right. Sit, stand, or speak. That's the name of the piece.
Yes.
I think it's very important, and we each have to make our decision about where we are and how we'll negotiate these troubling times.
And normally in a show, we are not allowed to sit. We are not allowed to, to sit on the armchairs,
right,
which look like art, in fact, and not allowed also to touch the art. But you broke a taboo, in fact.
Yeah, I think it's important. I want people to be able to touch things, to stand in things, and to be a part of it. They're not sacred objects.
And in the show, it's very theatrical.
Is it?
Yes, it's done on purpose, right? It looks like it's just before shooting a movie or just after, and there's some mystery and there's some mise en scène. No?
It is, I was wondering, I don't know. I'm sort of too close to it to tell.
But you want kind of theater.
It is I am interested in performance, and many of the pieces, of course, are really based around notions of performance. And so you have the Pepper's Ghost, Lonnie, Lincoln, and Me, which is a performance in a certain kind of theater, an early form of theater. You have the Cyclorama, which is an early form of theater, theatrical display. There's Meaning and Landscape in Missing Links, which is also this way of building installations that I'm sort of interested in the way people can inhabit the space. You know, how they engage the space, and how the space invites them into a query. Do you understand? You know, how it invites you in, and where are you allowed to be? And the most important thing for me is that you're comfortable in the space, so that I try to build work that is embracing. The piece for me feels as though I'm moving through an opera. It's very operatic.
Yes.
And yeah.
And it made me think about some of Bob Wilson's mise en scène.
I'm sorry?
Bob Wilson.
Oh, that's interesting. That's nice to know.
Yeah.
Since he's a friend and I care so much about him, but our work is so different.
For sure. Yeah. But there's a basic feeling.
The material and the lighting, the way light is used. And I'm a huge fan of Robert's, and I'm actually very concerned about him now as he's aging and he's having some problems with his body, and I'm hoping that he will hang on because he's brilliant and is a guide and a friend and a teacher.
Ah, nice. So,
but I've never thought of us in the same breath.
And what about William Kentridge?
William and I think, we're interested in the same things. We're very much interested in the same things, and we use similar kinds of materials, but we use them very differently.
For sure, because with you one can touch, which is very different.
You know, I think his work is also funkier, right? It's something kind of funky and more rustic, and sort of brassy about the work. And my work is actually much more elegant. It's a little bit more refined and a little bit more pristine, which is sometimes a problem. You know, that doesn't quite have like that odor that I think is absolutely sort of necessary but it's just my way of making. I just can't help myself.
Yes, and also less nostalgic. There's a nostalgia in his work.
Yeah, it sort of pushes the edge because it pushes more towards design and beauty. I'm very interested in design. So, you know, if you walk into the piece, the case study room, right? All of those materials, how the desk looks. You know, this 1950s beautifully designed desk, this beautiful, you know, sort of, you know, modernist chair. You know, there's all this sort of stuff that's, you know, based on the way in which we use contemporary design in our homes, which is not unlike my home. It's where I live. And so I brought those ideas forward to the exhibition, thinking that this is the space, we use this space as the starting point for interrogating all the other spaces. Right? My case study, the case study of the history of violence, starting with the Black Panther Party, the Civil Rights Movement, and all then that follows. Starting with that, the Black Panthers, who were simply attempting, these young men who were attempting to take care of their communities, to resist the police and police violence and police brutality in their communities. That's all they were trying to do. 18, 19, 20 years old. That's how young they were. 50 years later, we're still dealing with police brutality, systematic oppression against Black men in particular. The changing same, as Amiri Baraka would say. So we start with, you know, looking at those movements, the Civil Rights Movement, the rise of the Black Panther Party, as a sort of an opposite force, right? Because the Civil Rights Movement, led by King, was about peace, right? The Black Panthers are saying, no, we have to actually arm ourselves. These people will take our lives. So we start with that, and then we morph into the possibilities of what happens, from repeating the obvious to the systematic violence, to what happens in Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase, the role of French men and Black women, African women in Louisiana and New Orleans, the rise of Creole culture that's there, that kind of violence that happens between these couples that are not allowed really to love, right? You know, so this whole system is set up of subterfuge and mistresses and all this bullshit around, you know, sexuality and Blackness and identity and whiteness and control and power, you know, in the United States. A city that's unlike any other, right? That's not even considered a part of the United States. It's so different from every other part of the United States, no? So, you know, so we look at that, we look at, you know, the Civil War, Lincoln, Lonnie, and me, and we trace sort of the development of human rights through Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So there are all of these ideas that are really at play.
And what about the door?
The door. The door is, you know, our spiritual journey, that thing that we'll all pass through. One way or another, we're all dying. And one way or another, then, if we can sort of figure out, while I'm here, I hope that I can simply figure out the breadth of my humanity and offer it to you as a gift, even when you'd rather see me dead, possibly, yeah? So, if I can simply do that, if I can simply hold on to the breadth of my humanity and offer it to others as a space of habitation and consideration, then I can die with ease. Then I can go on.
But one can't climb to your door.
No. But there's a door knocker.
Yeah, but I can't touch it.
So thank you. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Merci.